listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes and Master Coach Jenny Fontana, founders of the Life Coach Method. Each one of our uplifting and deep dive episodes is geared to help you tackle the things that hold you back from having the most magnificent life you deserve. Sit back, relax, and prepare to be coached.
Good morning, everybody. Dr. Callie Estes. It is Unpause Your Lifetime, and I am excited today. As we all know, when I'm talking about mental health or coaching, I get excited when I have a guest on that does something a little different from me, and we can kind of talk shop. So without further ado, I'd like you to meet Alain Dumonceaux, and he is the creator of the Purposeful Man for the Awakened Man movement. He's on a mission as the beacon for what it means to live an authentic life. For the past 3 decades, he has lived the highs of the Culinary Olympics to the lows of losing it all, almost twice. Today, Alain's purpose is to guide men to rediscover their life's mission, starting with a purposeful action plan called The Return of the King that sets the stage for their hero's quest. So without further ado, welcome, Alain.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. Looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. So let's get right into this. Well, first, tell me, what is the Culinary Olympics? Are you cooking for somebody? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, absolutely we are. So Culinary Olympics has been around for probably about 4 or 5 decades now, at least since the early 80s for sure. That's when I started to get involved with it, and it is a cooking competition. There's a hot food competition where you're actually cooking. Those are national teams that are competing. I competed as a regional member, and so we're just producing food that would be imagined to be served hot, but it's cold. And so, yeah, so it was quite the experience. Did course for five person, 5-course dinner, 8-course, 4-person meal, and an appetizer selection. So it was really intense work. It's 48 hours of super intense work, because you have to do everything at the last minute and get it out there. And yeah, I was really fortunate to be surrounded by a great group of men to help guide and lead me, and was fortunate enough to win a couple of silver medals.
Nothing better than men in the kitchen. All of my
Yeah,
listeners
absolutely.
know that is my least favorite room. I don't even know how to use the things that are in there. Let's put it that way. I burn rice. So that's fascinating. So you've got a bunch of men in the kitchen at the Olympic level. That's awesome.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
what was your hardest thing to make? What was the most challenging thing you've ever made in the kitchen?
Oh man, there's been lots of things. I think for me, one of the more challenging things is to get the perfectly clear, like crystal clear consomme, because the process of it is several steps. One, starting off with a basic stock, and then it's the clarifying process. And the clarifying process uses what we call a wrap. So it's going to be portions of ground meat, some egg whites, and if it's not cooked at just the right temperature, while your consomme will look clear, when you go to reheat it, if you haven't cooked it correctly, you'll have little flakes of egg and meat floating around it, and that's probably a chef's worst nightmare. Spending all this time, several hours to do this over the course of a couple of days to produce it, and then when you finally go to serve it and you see that happening, it can be really heartbreaking. And so that's probably my most difficult one. That and souffles, but once you get the knack of the right temperature in your oven, that one is actually pretty easy to overcome.
I don't even know what a consomme is. That's so above my pay grade. I have a friend who's a chef, so she'll come over and she'll cook for me because
Nice.
I'll tell. She's like, "What are you having for dinner?" I'm like, "Whatever I can find that's takeout." She's like, "Are you kidding?" I'm like, "No." So she'll come over and she makes all this stuff. I'm like, "What is this?" She goes, "Don't ask. You'll never learn how to make it. Just to eat." So whenever I talk to somebody that loves to cook, I find it fascinating because you guys talk about all these fancy things, and it's so beyond my scope of like I can make basics, mac and cheese, the easy little things. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. So what made you want to do that, to compete at that level?
I always had an interest in food from a very young age. My mom was an okay cook, And she cooked for my dad, and so dad liked to have everything well done, and so there wasn't a lot of, we didn't. I would say there was fine cuisine in my home, but there was always good, tasty food. And at a very young age, I really enjoyed that. Mom used to make her own bread, and so I loved seeing that, participating in it. But what really got me going was in weekday afternoons at around 4 o'clock. We, Graham Kerr would come on with the Galloping Gourmet. Now I'm probably aging myself here a bit. So that used to be a cooking show on in out of the US, and Graham would make these classic French dishes, and at the end he would have a guest. They'd sit down, they'd have a big glass of wine, and the best part of Graham was watching him cook, and then he'd be cutting the food and eat it, and then all the food, all the good food noises like that. It's like I thought I just want that experience for people, that you
That's
make
awesome.
something and they have that experience of that is so incredible. And really that started it between that and then Three's Company and Jack Tripper. I thought, hey, single guy living with, some women and have my own restaurant. I thought that'll be great, but I ultimately ended up by marrying my high school sweetheart. So that part was out of the question. But you know, really those things were catalysts for me. Food has always been a big part of it. And I think for me, what a great way to bring family and friends together, but around a kitchen table.
That's awesome because when everybody gets together, they're always congregate in the kitchen.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so here you are, I call it chefery. So you're cheferying because you're not just cooking, you're like chef level. How do you get into this other stuff? How do you bridge that gap into coaching? How'd you get there?
I think when you really think about the idea of being a chef is that while you can do everything on your own, the real skill of a chef is being able to coach and lead people and teach them on how to do different things in order to create that one plate. And so you have to be a great multitasker. You have to be excellent at delegating, and you have to really understand how to lead and motivate people. Because without those, and people get the idea of seeing, Gordon Ramsay and he's losing his mind on TV. And you got to remember that's a lot for show, although it wasn't far off to how it was in the kitchens when I was coming into it. With chefs getting extremely upset because it's their name on that plate. And so I found that there was opportunity for me to really hone my people skills because there is a time crunch. You can't think about going into a restaurant. It's not like you sit in the restaurant and go, well, come back in 3 hours and then we'll bring you your food. Like there's a crunch time where, the expectations of 15 to 20 minutes that you're going to get your food in each course. And so there's lots of pressure. And so you really learn how to manage your emotions. You learn how to manage others and help them manage their emotions, because when the pressure's on, that's when we need to be functioning at our highest levels. And it's truly a labor of love, and it takes a lot of practice, a lot of gamesmanship in order to be able to walk the nuances of all the different personalities.
That's such a good correlation. I've never heard anybody draw that correlation that clearly because that's exactly right. Exactly what you have to do in the kitchen at that level, not just, making a casual meal for two rowdy kids. You're actually at that level is exactly what you're doing in the coaching sector. We have a, product to deliver, or we have a results driven item service, and we have an expectation of our clients that we're going to hit a mark, that we're going to complete something in a specific timely manner. That's a really good analogy. Now, between the two, what's more fun?
That's a great question. I since I've transitioned out of the kitchens and now I lead larger organizations in the hospitality industry as well as coaching, I would say that coaching is more exciting and more fulfilling today, and only because it's another way for me to apply the skills that I learned as being a chef, competing in the Olympics, but also my personal life challenges in helping and guiding. And I focus in the sphere of men's personal development and helping them really understand who they are and what makes them tick. And so I get a lot of fulfillment out of seeing men transition from a struggle in their life, whether they have a marriage that's flatlined or a business and career that's just stagnated, or their personal life is they've woken up and they go, man, this is not where I expected my life to be. And they
Right.
finally want to take responsibility for that and say, this enough's enough. It's time to make a change in my life and regain some respect for myself so that I can get that from others.
What makes your program different than, say, anything else on the market? Because there's some pretty, I don't want to say hardcore, but like, militant type programs for men that are more like boot camps and,
Yeah.
put your big boy panties on and man up. And they're kind of, I don't want to say they're run by narcissistic men, but they're very, like they attract a very specific type of guy
Yeah.
as opposed to the feeling, in touch with your emotions type. So what's different about your program?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dr. Callie. I think that the nuance for us is that while those programs that you just described are excellent, how many times in your life are you going to effectively be able to utilize that? I would offer you to suggest that that's rare because that's not how people relate to. The days are long gone of a coach or a leader standing over top of somebody berating them. Today, what we need to how we need to work with folks, especially men, is helping us understand that it's okay for us to have feelings. It's okay for us to, we're angry. So why? So we want to focus on where is that coming from? What's the story behind that? And is there a set of values and beliefs that you're still holding that are no longer serving you that's causing you to have these repeated challenges in your life? And so our program really dives into the the mental aspect of our life and really helping them develop skills. I akin it to being uh, like the samurai warrior. We have the skills that if we truly needed to take definitive action, like you were talking about in some of these other programs, we could do that, but we have the resolve and the wherewithal to truly understand where our limits are and how to exact the right amount of energy at the right time with the right individual. And I think that is a lacking piece in the men's sphere. We see lots of things about, like you said, there's warrior stuff going on, there's stuff going out in the wilderness, and all of those are great. They're all experiential, but the take home for me is how do we apply what we're learning in today, everyday life? How do I go leave this program and go home and have that hard conversation with my spouse that I've been delaying to have because I don't know how to do it. And so we focus on teaching men on how to truly lean into their lives and how to really understand what makes them tick so they can show up better.
I love that. I love how you package that because that's what I do in the addiction sector
Mm,
and the mindset sector, which is the exact same thing. It's getting to the root why. Why am I doing this? Why am I behaving this way? Why is this happening? And it's great that we have all those other programs, the hoorah programs, as I call them. But if
yeah,
we don't figure out why we behave a certain way, we never truly change that to get the desired result we want. So that's awesome. I'm glad you're doing it for men because there's so many programs for women out there that are like this. It's just there's not a lot for men specifically where they can, be themselves and they don't have this, you have to be strong and, men don't cry and men are providers. And, we look at like men's mental health and it's so
yeah.
shoved under the rug because we don't want to see men, ever exposed or maybe, crying or upset. We just want to avoid that. Put your big boy
Yeah.
panties on.
Well, let me
So
ask you, that's a great point. Let me ask you a question. In my work, I find anyways that when men are having that opportunity where they want to be vulnerable, they're nervous about doing that because they're not sure how their spouse, their wife is going to accept that. In your work, are you finding that when it does happen and we're being vulnerable, is that a good thing that they're doing that? Or is there a different way that it should be approached? Because I'm finding that if we don't teach and train them on how to deliver that message, what we think our spouses want, we could be delivering the wrong message.
I completely agree with you. I've worked with so many men that have, the wives are calling me for the addiction. They're over drinking.
Right.
They're, doing cocaine. They're sleeping with prostitutes, whatever the issue is. They call me and they say, I just want this stopped. And I say, well, wait a minute. Let's figure out why it's happening. And then
Mm,
part of it is they don't communicate with their spouse. And the men's needs, emotional needs aren't even getting met. So when I sit them down and I talk to them and they say, well, I checked out of my marriage because I walk in the door and it's nonstop, do this, do this, do this, do this. It's not how was your
Mhm.
day? It's not how do you feel? It's here's what's expected of you. So I've learned to be the strong silent type. Well, on the back
Yeah,
end, they're drinking to cope with that. And then when we teach them how to communicate and we start, working in there, the alcohol goes down. And I
yeah,
always tell their wives, alcohol's not the problem. It's their solution to a problem. And
yeah,
they're blown away. And they're like, well, I thought alcohol was the problem. No, lack of communication is the problem and inability to be present in your marriage because of the way things are. Now, I don't do what you do.
right.
So I do more the addiction, mental health, mindset stuff. But it's great that we can have those conversations with men that are vulnerable and able to get to the bottom of things because we couldn't years ago.
Yeah. Well, I think, I'll say, this is a pretty broad brush stroke I'm going to make here, but I think that women have had this figured out a long time ago. They've learned to, and I think it's a lot to do with how they're brought up. And I can think of, the time that we were old enough, I'm the oldest of five, the time that I was old enough to walk and watch my brothers and sisters come, they were no longer on dad's laps. So the attention that you received from dad was slim to none. And I think that's pretty common across, especially for boys. Hey, like go and do your thing. And because we haven't been able to learn how to regulate our emotions, how to have emotion, and it's always been, children to be seen and not heard, and the men are asked to be repressed, that when we do finally tired of stuffing things down, it's like a volcano going off.
Yes.
And I see that, and I see that as as a father of a son who's an addict and struggles with making healthy choices around drugs and alcohol. I look at them, I'll call them the mistakes and the things that maybe I could do different. Not that I'm owning his story. That's definitely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is how much of the past, the repetition of the relationship I had with my father played out with my two boys. As I think about today at my age and rekindling the relationship with my youngest one, at least, is because there's still a struggle with my oldest. But I think it's just how we're raised, and we just haven't learned those skills yet. And that's where I wanted to really come in with this work, is to help men develop those skills, get them into a place where they can feel validated, feel
Hmm.
respected, and get that from their peers and their partner. But it starts with them. They have to really do some introspection.
And I love that. I love that you said it starts with them because a lot of men are looking for external solutions to an internal problem. And that's what they're trained to do. They're trained to solve a problem.
Yeah,
If the car breaks, what do? Well, we pop the hood. We figure out what's wrong. Okay, it needs a new alternator. We fix it. Problem solved, right? They're trained to be action step oriented. But when it's like, well, wait a minute, we have to diagnose the car first. Well, it's not just as simple as popping the hood and looking in the engine. We have to take it apart and then we have to figure out why it's not working. And then we have to put it together and then maybe take a few tries. And they're not used to that. They're used to here's a problem, fix it. Okay, it's done. Moving on to the next problem.
yeah,
So I really love that you're doing this work and I think it's much needed in our communities. And I think it's going to make, humanity better, which is awesome. There's a very few people that are in the healing and helping professions because they love the work they do. A lot of
yeah,
people jump into it for the money grab, oh, we're going to do high ticket coaching and, they don't really know what they're doing. They're just kind of floundering around in the space. So I applaud you for that. It's pretty awesome.
I appreciate that.
Now, how can listeners find you if they want to sign up for a program or just connect? Where are you located?
So I'm all over the social media. You'll find the handle at the Awakened Man. It, just type that in. You're going to find my work there. But best place to go is to go to my website, theawakenedman.net. What you're going to find on the website, there's a pop-up. I have a free exercise for you to download and go through. It's called Setting the Compass. What the idea of this exercise is to give you opportunity to reflect on how the last 12 months of your life have been, and then to write a headline. What would the newspaper headline say about your life in the last 12 months? And then I want you to do the same thing for the upcoming 12 months. Things are going to be different. What are the things you would do differently. So there's some questions to guide you on that, and then write that headline. The reason I offer that is opportunity to get a sense of the kind of work that we do, the type of introspection I'm asking you to do. And if you think that's something that intrigues you, then I'm going to encourage you to start working with us and join our Band of Brothers group mentoring program. We're just a group of ordinary guys working to live extraordinary lives, and it's an opportunity for you to get around like-minded men who are looking to do that.
That's awesome. And we're going to put all of those links up for the listeners. And we'll tag all your socials so they'll be able to see everything of where you are, and they'll be able to reach you if they're interested in signing up or just connecting and having that conversation to start.
Love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciated our conversation today.
You're welcome. And thank you for coming on the show, and I appreciate it. You have been listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes, and thank you again for listening, and tune in for another episode.
Thank you for listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes and Master Coach Jenny Fontana. Head over to www.thelifecoachmethod.com to learn more about coaching yourself and how to become a master coach.